In this video, I'm going to teach you how to process your mix bus like a pro in 3 easy steps that's going to take less than 5 minutes of your time. My name's Tyson. I've been mixing and mastering for over 13 years. I've mastered over 1,000 songs as a professional mastering engineer. And so I want to show you the very simple process that I use in every single mix to process my mix bus to get professional industry standard results. So let's dive in. So step 1 inside of your mix bus is to add saturation. What is saturation? Saturation is basically very subtle distortion. It's just adding harmonic information to the mix overall. So essentially, all we're doing is just adding noise to everything. But because we're using the input of all of the current existing frequencies in the mix, it's very musical sounding. And so this is one of the secrets, if you will, of a lot of people when you have mixes that sound too clean, like this is the secret, right? That people use to fix that issue inside of your mix. And so saturation can do a lot of great things for your mix. It can also be overdone. The reason why we're using it in this case is really just to add this layer of paint, if you will, to the entire mix. So it all sounds like it's in the same space. It's adding similar harmonic patterns to everything in the mix, and it sounds more unified without having to add a bunch of compression that glues everything together dynamically, which we are going to do later. But this is kind of the frequency equivalent of that, if you will. So that's our first step, is just add some saturation. Where do you find saturation with stock plugins? Well, the easiest way is to go into the multi-effects and pull up our fat effects. And we want to turn everything off, so we don't want to filter it, and we don't really want to master it either. So I'm just going to turn that off there. And this is the only thing we're going to look at, is this distortion. And you can see there is some soft saturation and then a whole bunch of other types of distortion that we can add. So we're going to turn all that off except for this saturation, and that's what we're going to use. We might use a little bit of this tube. This tube sounds really good too, but is also very obvious. So those are the 2 types of saturation that I will generally use on the mix bus. So let's just start slowly dialing this in and seeing what we get out of the mix. So it's really subtle, but we are adding just a little bit of kind of grit to the entire song, unifying everything a little bit and adding just that extra layer, right, of cohesiveness across the whole mix. Let's add a little bit of this tube here. Yeah, the tube is too much. We're not going to use that. All right, let's skip that for now. All right, so that's step 1, is adding some saturation. Step 2 is now EQing our mix to reach that optimal sonic balance possible. What is the optimal sonic balance? You ask, how do you actually EQ? How do you know where to boost and cut? That's a great question. So I'm just going to add my EQ here first. I'm going to use this graphic EQ just for funsies. And we're going to change the output to smooth. So this is just changing the saturation. I don't know why I put that in quotes. It's just changing the saturation model. So it's going to sound more like a bus EQ that we would normally hear on mixes. So that's why I'm changing this output here. You can up this drive to add your own saturation. So if you don't want to use the fat effects or anything like that, great. This is another option of how to add that. We're going to keep it relatively subtle. I don't want to add too much, but I do like this EQ overall. So, but back to the question at hand, how do we know where to boost and cut? And we want to find that source of truth. And I can't trust my ears necessarily, especially at this point in the mix. I've listened to this song way too much. And so I'm completely, frequency blind, if you will, to what is actually happening. So I want to find my source of truth, which is pink noise. So this is pink noise over here. We can see this on the analyzer. It's flat all the way across. And so what we're looking at on this is really between about 100 hertz and 5 kilohertz. We want this middle area right here to be flat all the way across on our own mix. So this is our mix here. So we can just compare these 2 side by side. So let's make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. Okay, so you can see we have a lot of buildup around this like 125 to 200 hertz range, and then it's really weak basically everywhere above 600 hertz. And so we are going to be trying to bring that area up and the lower area where it's building up down, because we want it to match, right, again, between 100 hertz, 5 kilohertz, this line there. So we're not going to get 100% of the way there. We're just moving everything in the right direction, right? Our mastering engineer is going to have the last take at this and the last sweep and try to make this the best sonically balanced song possible. But this is going to give us that first initial bump in the right direction. So we're going to cut here first, about a decibel. The 60 hertz could actually use a little bit more. And notice I'm not making huge moves. I'm doing about a decibel at most on all of this just to nudge everything in the right direction here. All right, so here's before. So you can tell there's just so much clarity that's brought to this mix just by this very, very simple and quite subtle move on our mix bus. So that is step number 2, is EQ, using pink noise as the source of truth. I am not that worried about the top or the low end during this step. I'm only focused on between that 100 hertz and 4 to 5 kilohertz range. It's the only area I'm really looking at because my mastering engineer has all of the control in the world over those other areas. So I really don't need to worry about that at this stage of the game. So let's move on to the next stage of the process, which is, that's the wrong channel there. Yeah, right here is just adding a little bit of dynamic control. We're going to bring up our compressor. We're going to use this vintage VCA, and this is an SSL G-Comp bus compressor, if you wanted to know or cared. It's a great sounding compressor, so we're going to use it. All we're going to do is we're going to be using a relatively longer attack, usually between 50 and 80 milliseconds or so. And then we're going to use a fast release, so usually about 50 milliseconds or less. So this is going to increase the already existing dynamics in the track because this mix is already very thick. I don't want to be adding less dynamics. This move is actually adding dynamics to the track because it's increasing those peaks and decreasing the valleys just a little bit. So it's actually increasing the microdynamics of the track as a whole. And this will allow us to have a little bit more feeling that's being brought out by this track. So especially if you listen to the snares and the kicks, those are the things that are going to be a little bit emphasized by this. And then everything else is going to be just brought down just a tad. And it's going to pump a little bit, but it's not going to be an obvious pumping. You're not going to be able to really hear it, but you'll feel this kind of push and pull from this type of compression. So that's really what we're after. We're going to be very, very subtle with this. Anything that we're doing to the entire mix, we should be very cautious of and very subtle with. So here's this mix bus processing. We're going to use 3-to-1 ratio, 50 millisecond attack, 50 millisecond release, and let's move our knee down. Auto gain off, auto release off, and we're going to use this threshold to get 1 decibel or so of gain reduction. All right, so here's before and after that move. Do our makeup gain by 0.5 decibel. There we go. I can really hear it in the kick specifically. So if you don't hear it, go back, listen to that AB again, and listen specifically for the kick itself. All right, moving on. And so that's how easy it should be to process your mix bus. Remember, saturation, EQ, then compression. Make sure that you're following pink noise for your EQ. That's the most critical part of this entire mix bus processing. But if you follow this, you're going to end up with far more professional results, and I can't wait to hear your results with this technique.